Thank you so much. Thanks, Steve. This is a wonderful conference. I just wanted to mention it's really, really awesome to be in Florida. I actually grew up in Florida. I grew up in the Fort Lauderdale area, but I've lived my adult life in California on the West Coast, so I'm hardly ever here. It's so nice to be here, and when I came in, I felt that heat and was like, yes. I felt so good. Everywhere else is a little too cold for me from being here in my young years. But anyway, so I'm the projects manager for United Poultry Concerns, as well as I've written the book, The Ultimate Betrayal, Is There Happy Meat?, focusing on all these labels that we're seeing, the free range, cage-free, organic. But today we're going to focus in on chickens. And tomorrow I'm going to be speaking about my book and all those labels that I was talking about and issues around this new method of small-scale farming, and that's going to be at 11 a.m., and I encourage you to come to that one if you'd like to hear more about that. But today is about chickens, and chickens are just really, really amazing creatures, and I'm going to get more into that. But I'd just like to talk briefly about United Poultry Concerns. This is a wonderful organization that I am just privileged to be a part of. United Poultry Concerns was founded 25 years ago by Karen Davis. You see her over on the left there with Carla. And we have a sanctuary for chickens and other birds in Virginia with over 100 permanent resident birds, and then we do rescues where the birds come through and get adopted out as well. And that is it Oliver? Yeah, that's Oliver over on the right. Let's see if this is going to change. Yay, it's working. We're good. Okay. So we do a lot of education and outreach, tabling, leafleting, doing presentations like I'm doing today. And I actually do have a table set up now in the exhibit hall, so you're welcome to come by and say hi to me afterward and get some information. And we just had International Respect for Chickens Day. This is an international day of action that we organize, encouraging folks to take some kind of action to draw awareness to the plight of chickens, to let them be known, be heard. The main way that most people encounter chickens these days is dead and in body parts on a plate, and that's the only time that they ever encounter a chicken, and that's just so sad and so disappointing because they're just amazing creatures. Anyway, International Respect for Chickens Day is May 4th. It's still, we do kind of the whole month of May is International Respect for Chickens Month, so we're still kind of in the tail end of that, and we do lots of different campaigns, but this is an interesting one that we do for International Respect for Chickens Day, and that is our bus ads. We do bus ads in DC, San Francisco, New York. We opened up to other cities this year, Boston. We also are targeting this new fad of backyard chicken keeping and slaughtering. Now, I am going to talk about backyard chicken keeping later in the presentation, and we do feel that there are ethical situations and ways that you can keep chickens as companion animals. But unfortunately, a lot of these places, and it's happening a lot in our area. I live north of the Golden Gate Bridge in Sonoma County, and there are small farms that are actually having classes on how to slaughter chickens. So this is something that we are targeting. This was a protest that we had at one of these farms in Berkeley, right in an urban area in Berkeley, where they were teaching people how to slaughter their own chickens. So we do rescue. This is a direct rescue that we did of, I think it was 58 geese that were, in California, again, we're having a massive drought. Of course, you've probably heard that is just devastating, and our waterways are really, really receding. And there were geese that had been in this kind of just a off the freeway kind of lagoon for decades and decades, generations and generations, and the pond had slowly dried up. And the pond had completely dried up this last year, and the geese were, starving. Geese, waterfowl need water to survive. They, need it to get away from predators and for their food source. So these geese were starving. They were being picked off by predators every night. So we rescued rescued them and got them to another water source. So anyway, we do a lot of rescue. And there's lots of other things that United Poultry Concerns does, and I encourage you to go on our website and check us out. It's upc-online.org and see what more we do. But let's shift gears and talk specifically about chickens now. So chickens, are really absolutely, I would say, the most exploited land animal on the planet. They are killed in the greatest numbers. 97% of the land animals that are killed are chickens. For every one pig that's killed, 60 chickens are killed. For every one cow that's killed, 190 chickens are killed. So many more little souls. Their bodies are much smaller, so it takes more of them to process and feed people. And there's so many of them dying. We kill 35 million cows a year in this country. We kill 35 million chickens a day in this country. It's really staggering. So that's why United Poultry Concerns focuses on chickens. And when you poll people about their emotion, about their feeling about chickens, about all animals really, about how intelligent they think these animals are, or how emotional they think animals are. Dogs and cats are always the highest. They always think they're the most intelligent and have the most emotional capacity. And then cows and pigs fall somewhere in the middle. Chickens are always at the bottom. People feel that they're not as intelligent. Their brain's just this big. They don't know what's going on, right? And that they don't have emotional complexity. Well, the science is telling us a different story. And, it is absolutely scientifically proven now that chickens feel pain. This is overwhelmingly not an issue or in science anymore, that chickens of course feel pain, they suffer, they have the same central nervous system and ability to feel suffering that we do. So that's really no longer an issue. And so what science is now doing is they're shifting their studies to, well, are animals sentient? Are animals, do they have emotional complexities like we do? Are they conscious beings? Well, interestingly, there was a group of scientists that came together, neurobiologists and zoologists and all kinds of specialists that study animal behavior and the brain. And they wrote what's called the Declaration, it's called the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. And they came to the conclusion that animals have the same neurological substrates that generate consciousness as humans. And they even included, of course, avians, chickens, and even fish and octopus in that category. So the science is there, the data is overwhelming. Animals are sentient beings, they're emotionally complex, and they have consciousness. So, so this science really just contradicts decades and decades of misconceptions about chickens, and that chickens are stupid and they don't know what's going on and it doesn't really matter. It matters. It matters to them. So much of what we previously thought was really just the domain of humans and maybe primates, with communication, brain function, emotional complexity, is absolutely being seen in chickens and other animals. They're far more intelligent and cognitively sophisticated than previously believed. They express emotions like grief, fear, enthusiasm, anxiety, frustration, boredom, friendship. All these things are going on with chickens. So Scientific American had a recent article that was very interesting. It was called "The Startling Intelligence of the Common Chicken." And they found that chickens can be deceptive and cunning, that they possess communication skills that are on par with some primates, and that they use sophisticated signals and vocalizations to convey their intentions. When making decisions, chickens take into account their own prior experience and knowledge surrounding the situation. They can solve complex problems and empathize with individuals that are in danger. So all this amazing stuff is going on with these chickens that we didn't know before. So now let's get into what is happening to chickens worldwide, and we're talking billions of chickens worldwide. The chicken agribusiness. So there are 2 different genetic strands now that have been kind of genetically manipulated down. And on the left side, you will see the egg layers, which are generally kept in these battery cages. You might have heard about them. They are the tiny, tight cages where there'll be, several birds crammed in there. They can't move. They can't go anywhere. They can barely even stretch their wings. Imagine being in a crowded elevator. You know how it's so crowded that you're almost like touching the other people. You know how uncomfortable that is? And you're just like, oh, I just can't wait to get to the next level and get out of this elevator. Imagine if that was all the space you'd been given to live your entire life. How uncomfortable, how distressing and traumatic that would be, especially if you were in there with cage mates that maybe weren't so nice. So, it's really, really just beyond misery what these chickens go through. Now, over on the right, this is a typical broiler operation. Broilers, I don't like to use the term because, they're chickens, they're not for eating, but this is the term that the industry has put on them as broilers. These are the chickens that are raised for their meat. Now, the ones on the left, the layers, are only female. The ones on the right, broiler chickens, are male and female. And they're very different genetically because they've been so manipulated. And these... In both these situations, it's wall to wall, it's beak to beak, these floor systems, like on the right, with thousands of birds in these windowless warehouses where there's no fresh air, it's stale and stuffy and horrible, they're living in their own excrement. The workers have to walk in with masks on because the ammonia fumes, the intensity of the dust particulate and everything that's in the air, it can actually burn their nose, their nostrils, their throat. The little chickens have respiratory issues from breathing that. I mean, if the workers 6 feet up have to put a gas mask on, imagine if you were just a foot off the ground breathing that. Just horrible. Going back to the egg layers on the left, wild chickens, they would lay, and these, there is a wild counterpart to this. They came from a real wild bird, believe it or not. It's the jungle fowl of Southeast Asia is their genetic ancestor that, they actually share a lot of behavior with. They're still very, very similar to these jungle fowl. They would lay maybe a few clutches of eggs a year, like two clutches of eggs a year, maybe every 6 months. About 10 to 15 eggs a year, right? That's natural for them. These farm chickens can lay 100 eggs a year. That's how genetically manipulated they are. And it's so taxing on their bodies. They lose so much of their nutrients from that intensive process. And then the broiler chickens on the right, because they've been so genetically manipulated, they grow 65 times faster than a natural chicken would. And and I don't mean to say they're not natural. They're still, natural, but anyway, they've been so manipulated. And they will be slaughtered in as little as 5 weeks. They live about 5 weeks. 5 weeks, and boom, they are big, oversized chickens at the equivalent of like a preteen in human terms. It's just really hard to imagine what a miserable life they have. There's transportation to slaughter, which can be just so awful for them. They're grabbed violently by their legs, upside down, thrown into these crates. I've seen the video of them doing this. I've actually witnessed it personally, throwing them into the crates. They can't even stand up in these crates. And it could be that they're transported for days like this, with no food, no water, no shelter, in all extremes of weather, in freezing cold, extreme heat. Numerous birds die in transportation, and just from the awful, extreme situation. And that's an acceptable loss to the industry. They would, as far as economics go, they'd rather have birds die in transport than give them simple comforts of a little shelter or water. I couldn't hear, but. No, there are laws that an animal has to be alive when it goes through the slaughtering process, and that's because of diseases and other things. So they'll just be thrown onto dead piles at the slaughterhouse. So in the slaughter process, they can suffer from broken legs, broken wings, lacerations, hemorrhaging, dehydration, heart stroke, hypothermia, heart failure. Millions die before reaching the slaughterhouse from horrible deaths. And I'll just say this about slaughter. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but chickens are exempt from there's very, very, very few laws that protect farmed animals in this country, and one of those is the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act that says that an animal must be rendered unconscious before it is slaughtered, and chickens, fish, and rabbits, actually, all poultry, any bird, fish and rabbits are exempt from the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act. So the only animals that are included in this are maybe 0.05% of the animals that are slaughtered, and that's the cows and pigs. They do not have to be rendered unconscious, so when they go to the slaughterhouse, they take the legs, they're shackled up, upside down, they're going through the line. There's a conveyor belt, they're hanging upside down, and their throat is slit, and blood is drained. And this is, throat slitting is not a quick or painless way to die. This is a very traumatic, horrible way to die. They go through what's called it's like a water bath, or they call it a water stunning bath, but it doesn't stun them as in make them desensitized to the pain. It just paralyzes them, so their bodies aren't moving. So this way the feathers come out more easily, but they are still feeling everything that's happening to them. So this is a really poignant image. These two chickens were captured by an undercover investigation in Ohio by Mercy for Animals. And, I think this just really captures the hopelessness, the sadness, the desperation that these chickens' lives are reduced to. All animals, for that matter, and chickens as well, they have the right to live free of our human-imposed suffering. They are so full of life and curiosity and individual personality, and that's all just so denied, so oppressed, and just, they experience none of that in these miserable conditions. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what my book is about and what I've done extensive research into, and that's alternative production. The cage-free, free-range, we're seeing so many of these labels now, humane, sustainable, all these labels. And I go into great detail in my book about each of these labels, both ethically and environmentally, and I'll be talking more about it tomorrow at 11. But in relation to chickens specifically, cage-free simply means that the birds are out of those battery cages. If you remember a couple slides back, those battery cages where they were stacked on top of each other, they're out of the battery cages, but this is what a typical cage-free operation can look like. Does this look like an ideal situation for a chicken? No, absolutely not. They're still overcrowded. They are still debeaked because of the overcrowding. There's still the ammonia issues, and it still can be an incredibly miserable situation, even cage-free. And all a farmer would have to do to make it free range is he could open a little door on the side that maybe opens to a 5-foot by 5-foot concrete patio that's so unappealing no bird would even want to go out there, and they can call that free range because they have access to the outside. Doesn't necessarily mean the chicken ever step foot outside, and doesn't mean if it's concrete or whatever, but just if they have access to the outside. And another thing about these regulations, regulations, I say in air quotes, because these labels are not regulated. They're not at all. All a farmer has to do is fill out a form, send it to the regulating agency, maybe it's the FDA or the USDA, and they're awarded these labels. There is no on-site inspection of the farm. Nobody is denied these labels ever. The only exception to that is organic. Organic does have some regulation. They do have on-site inspection, but that is mostly geared towards organic, giving the animals organic feed and that kind of thing, not necessarily the ethical issues that we're talking about. This could be an organic free-range farm, because all organic means is that they have access to the outside. He could open a door for 5 minutes, and that can be free range. Now, there's a variety of different, situations and different farms. This is typical and very common. In my area in Sonoma County, this whole thing is so prevalent, and that's kind of why it prompted me to write the book, because it's so popular in my community. And there was this one farm that everybody kept telling me, oh, this is the one, this is the best one. You've got to go to this farm. They're really free range, they're really outside. So I went. And the chickens they were outside, but they had an area maybe about half the size of this stage, maybe about this size, and they were fenced in, and there was about 4 of those separate areas, and it was just mud. It was like a mud hole. And right on the other side of the fence was this luscious, gorgeous grass that they couldn't get to. They were in this mud hole. And I was like, this is the best we can do? It's the best of the best, really? These labels mean nothing. Don't waste your money.